Destro's cousin has joined the Iron Grenadiers. Darklon makes his triumphant return to G.I. Joe as this very cool updated classified figure. In this episode, we'll review the figure, compare it to my original 1/18 scale version, as well as the recent line of Grenadiers, and of course, come up with some awesome display ideas. If you love G.I. Joe classified and vintage 1/18 scale action, collectible toy displays, and everything in between, then this is the place for you. Let's go. We're back this week with G.I. Joe Classified, and this time it's from one of my favorite G.I. Joe sublines, the Iron Grenadiers. We're going to check out everything you need to know about the other mask-wearing member of Clan Destro, the mercenary otherwise known as Darklon. We'll also get into whether I think this updated version of Darklon is a fitting homage to the original, or whether it can stand on its own merits. Regardless, we have ourselves a new Iron Grenadier, and if you're a fan and completionist like I am, this figure may be the one for you. Join me as we roam the highlands of Scotland with the cousin of Destro himself, Darklon. So here he is in all his extreme late 80s glory, minus his evader, which I hope they release at some point, and to be honest, I'm surprised they didn't do it right off the bat. Definitely a shocking design for those not used to this era of G.I. Joe, but definitely in line with other real American hero figures of the time. Why they chose this specific design for Darklon back in the day, we'll never know, but it's all back with the Tiger Force inspired stripes, harsh color scheme as compared to the traditional red, black, and gold color of the Iron Grenadiers, and a mask that most definitely does not borrow from Destro's style. And of course, he comes with his signature futuristic black laser rifle, which was a must, plus some other cool accessories, including a very nicely designed longsword and scabbard, which we'll look at shortly. I have to say that this mask, which represents his family's design, is intricate and sporting a ton of details in the mold itself, even if mostly black. His eyes are wildly detailed and almost have an alien vibe to them, giving him a menacing and almost evil presence. It's beautifully complemented by his black right shoulder guard, which takes the original design and greatly adds to it, and again displays intricate design elements befitting of an elaborate piece from an ancient suit of armor. Whereas Destro's mask enrobes his entire face, this mask appears to be made of two pieces, with the underlying material appearing to represent some type of balaclava. Unfortunately, the mask in this case is not removable. One of the highlights of this figure is Darklon's longsword and scabbard, which attach to his back and is incredibly well designed with a ton of detailing, from the silver ornamentation at the top and bottom to the leather wrapping in multiple colors. His removable dagger sheathed on his leg also follows the same motif, even more impressive since it's such a small detail on the overall figure itself. His other leg sports what looks to be concussive grenades of some sort painted in gold, though not clear how these would be used given that his laser has a much smaller chamber. Still a great looking add-on and accurate to the original. Other than the beautifully crafted sword and scabbard and his wildly unique rifle, he doesn't come with many other accessories, really just adding on a revolver and dagger, though still both nicely designed. The one random standout though is his second head that can be used instead of his traditional one, which is just so completely out there, and to be honest, not really sure where it came from lore-wise, if in fact it has some lore to it. Regardless, it's extremely unique and dare I say cool with its Terminator vibe skull and strikingly black and silver paint application. It also has this very devilish tongue sticking out and reminds me a bit of some of the ninja related classified masks we have seen and will be seeing from the ninja figures in the future. It does indeed look to be a second mask given the same underlying balaclava aesthetic we saw with his traditional one and not something more robotic, though I will show you guys how we can play around with this on another figure in the line. I do wish it was painted gold though to fit better in with the Iron Grenadier style. A bit of a closer look at his rifle, which is also extremely unique and characteristic of Darklon himself, and I have to say they did an awesome job updating this laser to look and feel like the original, better than say for example the machine guns used by the recent classified Saw Vipers. And even though it has such a crazy design, it fits nicely into his arms and hands to give him tons of options for realistic display. I love this longsword edition, which as I recall was not included with the 1/18 scaled figure and is quite befitting of a Scottish clan member. This image is also a great example of the arm's range of motion, with it being able to realistically recreate an image of him pulling out his sword. Like the scabbard, the sword is very nicely designed with tons of details including a crest and ornamentation befitting a Scottish lord. With a bit of finagling, you can get it into this type of positioning, which is a perfect look for this figure. Also looks great with Darklon holding his revolver in his other hand in case you didn't want to use that huge rifle while he is brandishing his sword. Overall, I'm really liking this figure as a standalone. He's big, unique, interesting, and definitely fits into the later years of the line. The question is, how does he compare to the original? Speaking of which, my original, which I totally was surprised I had with me and was not with the rest of my original collection back home, minus his laser unfortunately. And from a quick look, you know what? They match up nicely with the G.I. Joe Classified Darkline being a more modern take on the original with its darker tones, while still keeping the excesses of the late 80s, early 90s. All the main elements are there, from the black mask and shoulder guard, to the right black glove and left hand bracer, to the stripes and general color scheme, though on this last point, the original was definitely brighter and more neon. Upon closer inspection, you can see the leg padding and ring and concussive casings shared between the two, but with some updates added to the classified version with, for example, knee guards and black paint on the boots, and sorely missing the continuation of the stripes from the chest onto the upper legs. Pretty much all the same design elements from the 1/18 scale Darkline are reproduced and upgraded for classified Darkline, but I kinda would've liked the more neon green used on the original, which I assume they'll use for the retro version. The general look of the mask is also there, though I do feel it's been updated design-wise and less long and flared like the original. Though it does still replicate that two-part mask that I described earlier. So overall a nice, though muted update to the original, taking many of the design cues from the RAH Darkline, and for me, who had the original, a great addition to the Iron Grenadiers. Makes sense for this main line to have a bit more realistic tone to it, at least with the darker colors. It will be interesting to see what they do with this for the retro line, and if they'll add in his vehicle at some point. Finally, my first use of the full Iron Grenadiers lineup, as I haven't done a review on this subline yet. So let's start with a fun display idea using this non-Iron Grenadier but still golden clad Destro in his spotted cougar cape, in this case having him hand over a case full of classified documents or cash to Darklon to bring to Cobra Commander. I love this idea for a display specifically because I get to use this version of Destro, which I feel is less military inspired and more money driven and business minded. However, he's still surrounded by his heavily armed guards given the sensitivity of the contents of his briefcase, and has invited his cousin for the extra muscle. I'm sure you noticed that Metalhead was missing, and I did that on purpose since the pose we like to keep him in is in his very active action-based Missiles a Launching one, which required a bit of rejigging for the rest of the Iron Grenadiers. Now we have the entire team to date, which is just so great and makes me want even more new members of the team. What I'd really like next though are some Iron Grenadier vehicles, which I feel are really missing from this subline. Still, this team really does look awesome together. Before we head further into team builds and unique display ideas, I wanted to showcase here some of the ways you can display Darkline on his own, which of course can then be mixed into the rest of your group displays. Starting with one we saw a close-up of a bit earlier, that of him unsheathing his sword from its scabbard draped over his back, which I think visually looks great for this figure. Something I didn't show earlier, but something you can do is add some of the smaller blast effects into his laser. He doesn't come with any, but there have been enough sprinkled here and there from other figures that can be used. They can even be used on ports on the outside perimeter of the barrel. There are 4, though a bit harder to fit in straight, so I didn't show it here. I love a good holster on the back of my figures, looks cool and makes for a great action pose. As for range of motion, he actually is really easy to pose in this position given his knee guards, and can be complemented by him taking out his dagger on his leg. You can also have him unsheathing his sword while holding a scabbard, though on second look I feel might look better with a thinner sword and scabbard. Holding his sword with 2 hands as seen earlier in a close-up, which also makes for a nice action shot. Takes a bit of work though to get him into this position. This has to be one of my favorites, if not my favorite pose, and will likely be the one we use in our displays once the boys take a break from playing with him. And of course, this very Shakespearean shot, which is more for fun than anything. But does lead into some cool ideas for Darklon with his second mask on, which really just looks so crazy that it's awesome. With this being my favorite pose of the skull-based sponge, I mean, wouldn't you be scared seeing this guy approaching you in battle with a sword in one hand and a dagger in the other? Since this mask reminds me of a Terminator skull, I wondered, what would this look like on a bat? And to my pleasant surprise, it actually looks quite good. Again, I wish it was in gold, but beggars can be choosers. I did try it on the original bat, who I thought it might look best on, but unfortunately the ports are different so it doesn't fit. I will try this out though on the Arctic bats once we open those. And for some final shots, how could we not have a meeting of the minds, or in this case the Iron Grenadiers versus Cobra, with a visibly angered Cobra Commander scolding Destro, who in return seems completely unfazed. Perhaps a deal gone wrong, or Cobra Commander not happy with Destro's side projects. I added in Firefly here because I feel he's a good counter to Darklon, and I think the Twilight Guard is extremely appropriate here to counter the Iron Grenadiers. As is common for mainline figures these days, we have the simple clear plastic front with, in this case, the awesome Iron Grenadier symbol with a Cobra symbol behind. The art is now on the side. Nice menacing comic book style art here, which I feel is more reminiscent of the 80s version of Darklon. Can't believe we're at 155 already. As always, great pose using the actual figure on the back of Darklon brandishing his sword and knife surrounded by Iron Grenadiers and bats. Wish they would have provided a short description for the skull mask though. And finally, the other side of the pack with an outline of the same picture of Darklan and some of the symbols we typically see included. So that brings us to the close of this week's episode. What do you guys think of this take on Darklan? And would you get him because you like the design, want him out of nostalgia, or both? Let me know in the comments section. Also letting you know that we'll have a few weeks hiatus coming up from full reviews, though I will likely still post some shorts and may even post some very different but fun posts until we return with some full reviews in mid-July. Thanks for watching. Look forward to seeing you guys back in a few weeks. And remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Bravo!